this is Evan. I want to thank you for your questions. They're really good questions, and unfortunately, um, the online quiz is not necessarily the best way to sort of test anybody's knowledge, but at the same time, it is bringing up some deep issues. So I'd like to go through question by question for you. Okay. So your first question is, okay, why is it that the real interest rate is what's important for investment, for capital investment, whereas the nominal interest rate is what is important for money demand. So let's first of all think about investments. So the idea is that, okay, if you're a business and you're thinking of building up your capital stock and you need to borrow some funds to do that, you're going to be borrowing that as an interest rate. The higher the interest rate, the more costly that is to you. However, it turns out that if you also have some inflation mixed in there, so the price level rises between today and when you have to retire your debt, when you have to pay your debt off, it turns out that inflation is actually it's going to reduce in a sense the value of goods and services that you have to sort of fork over in order to service your debt. So therefore, real interest rate is nominal minus inflation. Okay, nominal goes up, that's bad, that's costly, but the inflation rate goes up, that's good for the entrepreneur or the company owner. That brings down the cost of capital. Okay, now, okay, what about money? Okay, now this one is tricky, and I can guarantee you that there are people who have done economics for many years and still don't get the distinction. Okay, but what you're doing is you're really comparing between two assets. You're comparing between holding money and holding, let's say, a bond. Okay, so um, let's think of the real interest rate. Let's see. Okay, bond. Okay, your return, your real return is nominal interest rate minus inflation. Okay? Now, let's suppose that you just had some money in your wallet and you realize that that you're not earning any interest on that money, so you're actually earning a return, and it's a negative return. Money, okay, it's minus 1 times inflation. Okay? Okay, and I better spell this correctly here. So let's see what we got here. So the idea here is that you want to compare this versus that, okay? So it turns out that you've got the minus inflation in here and the minus inflation in here. So if you take the difference between that and that, what you end up with is in fact the nominal interest rate. So it's the nominal interest rate on bonds that represents the difference between the rate of return on bonds and the rate of return on money, or put differently, the opportunity cost of holding money. So in that sense, real and nominal is correct, okay? Next one here, okay? The LM curve is steeper, the interest sensitivity of money demand, and is steeper if the smaller the interest sensitivity of money demand, and the greater the interest effective income on money demand. Now, okay, this is probably a little bit trickier question, but let me explain to you, okay, the underlying the underlying theory behind the LM curve. Okay, so as I mentioned, okay, and I put this in a video, that the LM curve is the curve that that summarizes the set of points at which money supply equals money demand, and we derive that, okay? So um, we can write that down, and I'm going to use a little bit of algebra to show you here. Okay, so money demand, okay, the way that we've been writing money demand here, it's going to be A times the interest rate, and remember it's the nominal interest rate, plus B times output, okay, what we call the scale variable. Okay, so and A is going to be less than 0. Why? Because the higher the nominal interest rate, the lower your demand for money is, because you want to hold those bonds. And then B is going to be greater than 0, because the more your income is, the more you need this stuff to do transactions. So there you go. Okay. Okay. Now the other thing is that money supply is equal just constant M. Okay. So the idea is that MS is equal to MD. Okay. Now the way that my little trick that I always did when was to say that, okay, let's put this into deltas. Okay. So this means if money supply is money demand, then there's no change. We're in equilibrium. Okay. Which means that we can write this down. Okay. I'll just take this a little bit. I hope this algebra here isn't okay, but I'm just going to take this guy here, copy, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. Okay. Okay. And that's 0, and let's say that's equal to insert. I'm going to insert a little symbol here. Let's see. I want to find my delta. Okay, actually, I have a better idea. I'll do this. D, and then I'll turn this into a symbol here. Just a second. Home, and then I like to do this. I have to do this because, okay, so there we go. Okay, so there we go. Okay, paste. Okay, so the change in money is going to be, okay, you may remember, is going to be A times the change in interest rate plus B times the change in output. Okay, so now the idea is that if that change is equal to 0, we want to write this this output, this guy here, the LM curve. It is, okay, the vertical axis is interest rates and the horizontal axis is output. I always forget that, so I have to tell myself here. So now, okay, I'm going to rewrite here, okay, that first of all, I'm going to put this here. Okay, this implies that, okay, if I may, okay, okay, A is equal to minus B times that. Okay, did we get that? Okay. And then I'm going to do one more thing here. I'm going to do a couple more things here. I'm just going to do my algebra out loud for you. Okay. Copy. Paste. Okay, it's going to be delta I over delta Y. Okay, I'll get this just a second. Okay. Okay. And let's get rid of that. And that's going to be minus B over A. Okay. So let's think about what that means. Okay. It turns out, okay, here just a second. Okay, then remember this is rise over run. And the rise over run in this case, it's going, when I've got too many minus signs here, it's going to be minus B over A. So, okay, first of all, when you talk about okay, first of all, you should verify that it's going to be positively sloped. Why? Because we've presumed that B is equal to, is greater than 0, but greater than 0, but we're putting a negative sign here, so it's a minus, and then this A is minus, so it's a minus over a minus, so this whole slope is positive, and that's what we want. Okay, so then you can see the more sensitive money demand is. Okay, the higher is A and the lower that slope is. And then the more sensitive, that's to the interest rate, the more sensitive that money demand is to income, okay, that's your B, the higher is B, the greater the slope. Okay, so this was really okay, so what I'm trying to get across here, yes, it's liquidity preference, and liquidity preference is in fact this equation here. Okay, but it's, so you're doing sort of a trade-off between the sensitivity for interest rates and the sensitivity for income. Okay, and that's how you would get this answer. So the answer that they gave here was correct. Yes. Okay. Okay. Okay, so the idea is that yes, the question did not specify short-lived. It's a permanent change in government spending, and okay, we can just assume that this is a one-off change. in government spending. So government becomes more prevalent. Okay, so you remember that initially, um, okay, you're bringing when you increase spending. Okay, in the short run, your prices are fixed, and what does that mean? That means that you're boosting demand. So if you can imagine your IS and LM, you're shifting you're shifting your IS along the LM curve, okay, with no change in prices, okay? And you'll notice that interest rates are rising. So in the background, those higher interest rates are crowding out some of the investment. So the idea here is that uh, um, by increasing government spending, you are partially displacing some investment, but not totally, not one for one. And instead, you are raising uh, um, GDP beyond its full employment level. Okay, but then at some point, okay, as you know from your ADAS model, your price increases will kick in. And the way that happens in the ISLM is you're going to get a leftward shift or a series of leftward shifts in the LM curve. And that will happen shift, 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 shift until the price level rises and just enough to bring you back to your initial uh, um, uh, level of output, which we're assuming, which was, let's say that we're starting off at full employment and we get back to full employment. So when we start off at full employment and then we get back to full employment, okay, we are, in order to do that, since the price level is rising, since it's the real money, M over P, okay, unless we expand money, okay, real money is M over P, the price level rises, real money falls, the LM curve shifts to the left, okay, that brings up the interest rate and that crowds out completely uh, um, investment. So to put it differently, you're back at your old output, but the difference here is that um, the increase in government spending has completely displaced dollar for dollar in the long run your investment. Okay, but good question. Okay, okay. So if the investment demand, okay, C minus DR, so that's a constant, and then here's the investment's flexibility here, the responsiveness, and the quantity of real money demanded is E minus F of R, okay? Fiscal policy will be relatively potent in increasing aggregate demand when D is, okay, well, first of all, okay, D is small, okay? Okay, so what are we saying here? We're saying that, okay, if you have a large D, okay, and this is absolutely, okay, I guess you could say that, although relatively, I guess, is kind of tricky. But okay, you could say that okay, both are negative though. So um, the idea here is that okay, if you in absolute terms, if D is is larger, you have more sensitive investment, and that means that the interest rate rises. The more sensitive investment is to the interest rate, the higher D is, um, the more that you will be squeezed out of investment. Okay, by with fiscal policy. Okay, so um, if if that coefficient D is small, okay, you're not squeezing out investment as much. Anyway, okay, if you have a relatively small value here for D, okay, um, interest rates rise, but that doesn't affect investment very much. So that makes fiscal policy more powerful. So once again, fiscal policy is more potent in aggregate demand. First of all, the less sensitive is investment to increases in the interest rate. Okay, um, and then on the other one here, the larger this F coefficient is. So the idea once again, as I attempted to explain in the previous um, answer, the previous question, okay, that when you're thinking about money demand, you're thinking about this substitution that wealth holders have. Shall I hold a bond or should I hold money? Okay. Now, you could think of a very, very, very extreme case where people want to hold on to their money, okay, no matter what the interest rate is, okay? Okay, that's a very extreme case. But then alternatively, think about a case where, in fact, you have a little bit more substitutability or flexibility amongst your investors. So interest rates rise, so people are happy, they're willing to exchange their money in return for bonds. And when you hold bonds, what are you doing? You're actually providing financing for both the government and also private sector firms. So the idea is that, okay, in this small f case here, okay, you're not willing to provide any more financing, so that's going to squeeze out investment, and that's going to mean that fiscal policy is relatively less potent. But if your investors are willing to sort of provide, they're a little bit more flexible and they're willing to provide that extra financing when the interest rate rises, then that means that fiscal policy will be more potent. And why is that? Because you'll have a smaller interest rate rise, and all else equal, that will reduce the crowding out or the displacement of investment expenditures. So yes, it's a subtle question. Finally, this one, you are absolutely right. Okay, we are going to change that, and I apologize. But yes, that the change in planned expenditure should be 0.75 times the 1 billion, and then the total multiplier is 3 billion. So we'll make sure that you don't get, or anybody else doesn't get any, aren't penalized for this. David, I hope this helps, and I hope that also my provision of a little video is also helpful to you. Let me know if this was a good way to communicate with you. I hope you're staying safe. Thanks a lot.